guess the first question I had was I wonder if you could sort of describe for us what the main purpose is of the new land use review board. Is that
Yep,
correct? What
yep.
would the main mission be?
So it replaces the Natural Resources Board and the administration of Act 250 permitting. That's the that's the main purpose. Um, but Act 181 also changed the way that Act 250 will be um, that it changed the way that Act 250 triggers permitting needs, and it also now will involve the board will have to approve what are called future land use maps in regional plans. So every regional plan now will go to the land use review board for approval. And in particular, the future land use map will be the basis for some new tiers, tiers 1A and 1B, that will allow for Act 250 exemptions, particularly for housing. So the tier 1A and 1B classifications will apply to our village centers, downtown centers, and the neighborhoods that surround them. And so those future land use maps will provide the boundaries for those centers and surrounding areas. And those areas will then confer certain Act 250 exemptions on development projects that otherwise would have triggered the need for an Act 250 permit.
So this board then will have more authorities than the Natural Resources Board that
Yeah.
basically your land use review board came out of.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, I guess is this sort of a direct outgrowth or indirect outgrowth of Act 181 that was passed last year?
Yes. It's absolutely a direct outgrowth of Act 181. So Act 181 was much broader. It changed the way the downtown board, it changed the name of the downtown board and its jurisdiction a little bit. It also made some changes to the way that regional plans are adopted, or not the adoption procedure, but it made some additional requirements for regional plans in terms of community engagement that would need to be shown before a new regional plan is approved. So regional planning commissions will have to show more community outreach than they might typically have done in the past. Um, it it had some tax implications. I mean, it was a much broader bill than just establishing this new board and its authorities and changing the Act 250 jurisdictional triggers. There were other components to it as well. A really important component is that while the new land use review board is working on on the rollout of the new framework, there will be housing project exemptions for Act 250. So in our already designated centers and neighborhood development areas, there will be um, exemptions for Act 250 permitting for certain housing projects until the new rubric is in place, basically. And it'll be a few years before this whole new rubric is in place. So those exemptions are important.
Um, so I know Act 181, at least my impression is that Act 181 was sort of the final, or at least the immediate outcome of uh, attempts over in recent years to kind of revise or update Act 250, which was passed in what, 1971 or so, or early
Hmm.
1970s, and
More
uh,
than 50 years ago.
yeah. um, what were the main problems with Act 250? As it just was just sort of at the point where it just wasn't. It may have been useful back in the 70s and 80s to address the problems that were in play at that point, but time has marched on, and we have new issues now that the act just simply wasn't dealing with effectively.
I think that was part of what was behind it. Climate change and resilience and those kinds of issues were not talked about in the late 60s when when the impetus for the original law was passed. But that wasn't the only reason that people were clamoring for change. After 50 years, other things change too. And I think there were complaints that, and I think I agree that Act 250 can certainly be credited with saving Vermont from rampant indiscriminate development, but it can also be credited with contributing to where we are in terms of our housing crisis, um, because it's oftentimes duplicative permitting that that gets expensive and makes it more difficult to develop new affordable housing. So, but also that there were a lot of complaints about its how cumbersome it was for any kind of development. And so, part of the charge for this new board is to look at efficiencies, um, to look at the appeal process, and make recommendations to improve that. People also complain that, there are 9 district commissions and there isn't consistency across the state in terms of um, the interpretation of the law and how it was applied unevenly across the state. So, after 50 years, you can get a lot of, you know, uh, complaints that get racked up, right? And so, part of the idea behind this new board is that the board members are not just citizen appointees, but they are professionals with certain expertise that are related to the charge that the board has. We have a land use attorney on the board, an engineer who's been administering Act 250 at the district level for several years, um, a town manager um, and planner, and another municipal planner, and myself, who has both municipal and regional planning experience now. So,
So on the housing front, which seems to be one of the main drivers going on here, how will this make building more housing, particularly affordable or workforce housing, more attractive for developers to build? I mean, I know there's
because
struggles.
they won't need to get an Act 250 permit
Okay, so
in certain areas and up to certain sizes and depending on the kind of area that we're talking about. So,
so it's
so it
primarily
takes away the state permit burden.
okay. Now, will there still be the opportunity for local residents who might be concerned about a project?
The local permitting it doesn't take any jurisdiction away from localities. And in fact, there would be no exemption in municipalities that don't have their own rigorous, um, review process,
So the old
review
concern
and permitting
about
process.
a project gonna get stuck in, in environmental court or in the legal system and then being dragged out for years and all the costs for attorneys, that won't be as big a factor anymore, I guess, for a developer.
Well, I mean, people can still appeal a local permit. It doesn't take anybody's complete, it doesn't remove the right of appeal completely. Um, Both Act 181 and the Home Act did put limits on the basis of appeals on housing developments. You can no longer base your appeal on character of the area, for instance, if the local regulations allow for the the housing that was permitted. So, um, so yeah, it puts some limits um, on how appeals can be made, but just the fact that you don't have a second layer of permitting with a second, state land use permit versus the local means that there is less opportunity for appeal because there aren't two processes that you can appeal. There's just one.
Do you anticipate that this act will have some immediate impacts here in Bennington County? I mean, I know you're very familiar with the county here, both from your work at the BCRC and in Manchester. Do you see this act as sort of a boon or a step forward
So
here?
the interim housing exemptions are already in effect. So there are already you know uh, permit burdens that are released in our towns in the Bennington region. So there, if there is a housing project proposed in our villages and in a quarter-mile radius around them, um, as long as it's less than 50 units, there's an exemption currently for needing an Act 250 permit. And it's not just for new development. So whenever a project has already an Act 250 permit and the developer or landowner would like to change something and it had an Act 250 permit, then it would have to go through an permit amendment process. And so these projects are also now exempt from needing the permit amendment as well.
So I'm just curious, what attracted you to this job to apply for it? I mean, this is a big step forward from working regionally in Bennington County. Now you're going to have a statewide remit. I mean, was it the opportunity to kind of have an impact statewide? Was what attracted you to put your name in the hat?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the issues that I've been working on regionally and locally are the same. And so this is, yeah, it was an opportunity to make an important impact. Um, and initially, I thought I wasn't going to apply, but after considering it, um, I thought maybe it was an opportunity I shouldn't pass up.
So is there going to be anything in particular going to miss about working down here in Bennington County or with the
Oh
BCRC?
yeah, I mean, it's the work I'm doing here at the BCRC is very um, relationship oriented, and working with local municipalities and people in all of the region's communities. It's been really great. It's also, you know, um, being at the regional level with a group of 9 other um, staffers here. It's municipal work is it's much harder because the municipality doesn't have the kind of staff supports that you might find at the regional level, and it's been really great actually the last 2 years here at BCRC, and being able to work with the communities across the region has been really special. And it was not an easy decision to consider leaving it. So
But well, anyway, well, congratulations again, Janet, on this. It sounds like a very exciting opportunity to really make an impact on one of the most important and serious problems that's confronting the state at the moment, which is that the whole housing issue. I mean, it seems like, and I know we've talked about this more than once, that the housing issue seems to intersect with just about every other, serious issue, whether
yeah,
it's jobs or not enough younger folks staying in the state, or
yep,
it's the whole
right.
question and
It's
come
like a
back to
chicken and
housing eventually.
it's a chicken and egg housing, or housing that's affordable to people that can work here. My internet connection is unstable. Is yours? Hmm. That
So far
just
so
came
good.
up. Anyway, the one other thing I wanted to say, is that what Act 181 wasn't just about housing and reducing permit burdens on housing development, but it was also this re thinking of the way that it is administered could also be considered smarter from the standpoint of protecting our natural resources. Because one of the things that Act 250 led to, some people would argue, is that you got a lot of smaller development that was more spread out, because that kind of development didn't trigger the need for this duplicative, burdensome permitting. And so, um, if you rethink the way that, if you rethink this jurisdictional trigger question to be um, geographically focused instead of size of project focused, then maybe you can do a better job of protecting our rural areas and our natural resources than Act 250 was able to do, under the previous, under the current and previous framework.
As I understand it, one of the concerns that Governor Scott had about this bill was that it didn't go far enough to
Yeah,
create, a smoother path for more housing. Or,
yeah.
I mean, I guess, do you feel that's going to be something you can, work with or whatever, or that,
So I know that the governor's office is working on changes that it would like to see, and the legislature is working on a package of changes. And I think that the role of this board at this point is to take our charge that is clearly laid out in Act 181 and to move it forward. And I don't think that we should be in the middle of the policy negotiations on those bigger picture questions, um, that might still be negotiated between the legislature and the governor's office. Um, so I don't know if that, I think that answers your question, but
yeah.
um, you know, we're we have we have a charge. That's what our focus needs to be for the next few years. Some of that involves doing some study as to uh, the appeal process and making some recommendations about how we think that should look moving forward. Um, After a few years, we will be charged with delivering a report on how the new framework is working, how the new rubric is working. Um, so we will be providing input to some degree, but I don't think that the bigger policy questions are something that we should be weighing in on in the first few years.
Well, all right. I guess why don't we just leave it there for now? And how soon will is the board already kind of in action, or is it?
No, the board is meeting on Monday for its um, first meeting, and we'll be meeting in Montpelier at the Baldwin Street office. Um,
Next to the
so,
joint fiscal officer, or
sorry,
next to the joint fiscal officer, or not so?
I don't know. I'm not that familiar with the layout of the state's campuses up there. It's sort of behind and next to the Capitol building.
All
So,
right.
um,
Again,
so
congratulations. This is, I'm sure, going to be a fascinating experience,
yeah,
and you'll have an opportunity to make a big impact in something really important to the state. So
yep,
good luck, and I know they're going to miss you down at the BCRC.
yeah. Thanks, Andrew.